Greetings, family, royals, nobles, autochthons, Asiatics, Nagas, heirs, and heiresses. Dark Matter here once again with another one. All Asiatics should be aligned with each other. Again, all Asiatics should be aligned with each other. That is the name of this particular broadcast. Some of you may already know that these exact words are attributed to Noble Drew Ali. All Asiatics should be aligned with each other. To me, these words are natural common sense that all Asiatics should stick with one another, as that would be right and exact with the natural swing of things. Does not the Europeans stick together, which consists of mostly unnatural Euro-albinoid, so-called European white people, so-called white people? Nature supports sticking to your own kind. But when natural Asiatic, melanin-rich so-called black people stick together, there seems to be all kinds of problems, resulting in us being labeled as racists. Well, I'm here to tell you that that word racist is not as bad as you might think it is, as the word racist basically equates to someone loving their race and supporting and doing for their own race and their kind before doing for others. If you ask me, so-called black people in America have not been racist enough, because if they were racist and practiced true racism, they would be a whole lot more progressively further along than they are now. Nature supports racism, and I'm all about nature. Anyway, that is the topic for this broadcast. All Asiatics should be aligned with each other. But first, as always, let's get into some news. What's in the news? Did you all hear about this Planet of the Apes so-called white woman Laura Boebert, U.S. Republican representative from Colorado, suggesting that our lovely Somalian sister Ilhan Omar is a terrorist, and then trying to brush it off as if it was some kind of innocent joke, and then tried to apologize. But Ilhan Omar wonderfully came back at this hideous-looking cave woman and called her a baboon. And that is exactly what this woman looks like, a member of the primate monkey family. Okay, this orangutan-looking so-called white woman, Lauren Boebert, even had the nerve to go further on, saying that Ilhan Omar is black-hearted and evil. What I say is that this Laura Boebert, monkey-looking woman, needs to take her unnatural, non-American monkey ass back to where she came from, because Ilhan Omar is more American than she will ever be. So what else is in the news? The three filthy rednecks in Georgia who brutally murdered Ahmaud Arbery found guilty. Again, the three men, rednecks who in Georgia who murdered Ahmaud Arbery found guilty. What I have to say about this right off the top is, hippity hoo whoopie doo. This is not any real victory. If the heads of these three crackers did not roll in a bucket, true justice is not conserved. And of course, as always, you got the brain damaged, so-called Christian, so-called black woman and mother, after being psyched out and manipulated by sorry ass Al Sharpton on national television, talking about how much of a blessing that this verdict is. And I am so sick and tired of hearing some delusional black so-called Christian always talking about have a blessed day and be blessed. I strive to be blessed. That's BLISSED. I don't want nothing to do with being blessed. BLESSED. Okay, I don't see nothing good about what being blessed has done for any of you hypocrites, superstitious, superficial U.S. Negroes, blacks, coloreds, and African Americans, Afro/African Americans. Matter of fact, you Negroes appear to be cursed, a self-imposed curse at that. All of this bullshit rhetoric that U.S. Negroes have been talking about being blessed, and they are still in the same pathetic condition in America after 500 years. Okay, don't do me any favors. You can keep your blessings and keep passing them Christian curses and negative voodoo spells on your children. Okay, this Ahmaud Arbery verdict is certainly no damn blessing. There's a saying in law: if you intentionally kill my dog, I'm going to intentionally kill your cat. The key word here being intentional, because if it was done unintentionally by mistake, then that does not fit the definition of a crime. The late Malcolm X said it best when he stated, I am nonviolent, but when you choose to be violent with me, you nullify my nonviolence. Even the late Negro Baptist Christian preacher Martin Luther King Jr., after he woke up and admitted to leading our people astray, stated that we can no longer be peaceful with a people that is proven to be non-peaceful, referring specifically to those same redneck devils in the South in places such as Alabama, Georgia, etc. Obviously, you hypocrite Negroes do not follow Martin Luther King Jr. and love him like you say you do. But you are quick to run to a Martin Luther King Boulevard at some celebration in which both the naming of the street and the people that is allowing the celebration to happen is the ones that had him murdered in the first place. But all you want to do is go down there and take some Negro photos and eat some fried chicken and potato salad. Of course, the redneck Catholic so-called Christian Joe Biden deceptively commented on this bullshit verdict, or say these bullshit verdicts by saying that these guilty verdicts reflect our justice system doing its job. This is what Biden says. These guilty verdicts reflect our justice system doing its job. How many U.S. Negroes are dead after 150 years of Ku Klux Klan style murders? And all of a sudden in 2021, the U.S. justice system has been repaired and is now miraculously working. Okay, what about redneck Joe Biden immediately funding federal legislation to arm every so-called black person with an M16 bulletproof vest and helmet and marksman level gun training to defend the lives of themselves and their families, the same way that the U.S. openly states in front of the entire world that non-valid, non-authentic, rogue, apartheid, modern-day state of Israel has the right to defend themselves. You got Euro Albion, pale-skinned, so-called white people on a fictional movie set carrying real guns with real live ammunition, killing people dead. But so-called black people are not even allowed to carry to defend themselves under any circumstances. They got it in some states where if a brother is found carrying bullets, he goes to jail. And how about this bullshit Kyle Rittenhouse case where you can come to an event with an assault rifle with clear intentions to kill and actually kill and get off totally free? I mean, give me a fucking break. Excuse my Moorish Latin. Anyway, continuing with the news. Caribbean island of Barbados becomes a republic after swearing in its first president, cutting ties with Queen Elizabeth II and ending nearly 400 years of British rule. Let me say that again. The Caribbean island of Barbados becomes a republic after swearing in its first president, cutting ties with Queen Elizabeth II and ending nearly 400 years of British rule. What I'm going to say about this is I'm not impressed. Because we have seen and heard this before. If this Americana island, known as Barbados, is not going to completely shake off the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and get that foreign central bank off of their lands, then this semblance of independence is just another dog and pony show for entertainment purposes. Okay, they should have severed ties from the queen albino vampire bitch of England long before now. How long is it going to take for Barbados and the rest of these island nations to openly denounce the Monroe Doctrine of 1823? I have not heard one Caribbean nation, South American nation, or African nation denounce that doctrine yet. Let me get my place back. Kind of lost my place for a second. I'll say that again. I have not heard not one Caribbean nation, South American nation, or African nation mention that doctrine by name and openly denounce it. Anyway, it remains to be seen exactly what Barbados is going to do to show its genuine independence from the colonizers. Barbados cannot continue receiving U.S. aid just like many other Caribbean and South American nations and expect someone to believe that they are serious about independence. What else is in the news? Okay, this will be the last news article. The one I'm about to read will be the last one. This article is highly, extremely relevant to the overall topic of this broadcast, of this particular broadcast. And it will lead me directly into the matter at hand. Biden sends unofficial delegation to Taiwan. Let me repeat that. Biden sends unofficial delegation to where? You guessed it, boys and girls, Taiwan, which just so happens to be the place where the United Filthy Snakes is currently jockeying for position against the sovereignty and geographical interests of China and ultimately threatening China with war. I will read a little bit of that article. It says, former U.S. Senator Chris Dodd and former Deputy Secretaries of State Richard Armitage and James Steinberg, Steinberg, a redneck Jew / Jew banker, headed to Taiwan on Tuesday at President Joe Biden's request in what a White House official called a personal signal of the president's commitment to Taiwan and Taiwan's democracy. That's all I need to read right there. That's all I'm going to read right there. You all can find that article and read it in its entirety if you want. But first of all, what the hell do they mean by referring to this bullshit unofficial delegation to Taiwan as a personal signal? Nothing is personal. This is a continuation of U.S. crooked, shady, fraudulent business as usual, and a blatant provocation and act of war against China. You all should already know that China sees the island of Taiwan as its own providence, and it sees the Taiwanese people as misguided relatives. All of those slanted-eyed people are in one way or another. This is what I say. All those slanted-eyed people are in one way or another family and are all related to each other. Okay, there's absolutely no reason why North Korea and South Korea are at each other's throat unless they've both been bit by the same poisonous, venomous United snake and have been played against one another historically. That's exactly what happened. Then you got the Jew / Jew banker and former U.S. Secretary of State James Steinberg going over there. So you know that there are negotiable debt banking instruments and banking interests involved, which means that it is a banking matter involving the foreign central Jew Bank of Taiwan. Secondly, they just went ahead and told you what this is really all about. which is the United Snakes spreading their venomous, poisonous, toxic democracy to someone else like a filthy disease and the only real deadly pandemic that is going on around the world. Do any of you dumb so called US citizens even know or understand what a democracy is and how or when you became associated with it? When you should know that the original United States of America was set up to be a republic. The then U.S. War Department in Washington, D.C., on November 30th, 1928, published a training manual number 2000-25, which gave the exact definition of democracy, in which it defines democracy as a government of the masses, authority derived through mass meeting or other form of direct expression. Results in what? Mobocracy. Okay? Now I'm going to interject right here. Mobocracy. Do you idiots know what a mob is? Mob equates to mafia, otherwise known as gangster shit, which is exactly what you got robbing and extorting and murdering your ass every day. International banksters and monetary gangsters, global monetary gangsters. Okay, let me continue with this definition of democracy. Attitude toward property is what? Communistic, negating property rights. Attitude towards property is communistic, negating property rights. And I will once again interject and say, is that not communism? In which the United Filthy Snakes is now deceptively accusing China of in order to make war, which is what they previously accused Russia and Cuba of indulging in. Communism. Okay, it is all one big deceptive game and bold-faced lie. This East against West. Okay, non-democratic against democratic. Okay, democracy is the reason why your dumbasses cannot own any property and do not own any property to this very day. If you read your mortgages, it actually tells you that you are nothing but a tenant in that mortgage. And I know you all are at least smart enough to know that a tenant is clearly not an owner. The next part of this definition of democracy says, attitude toward law is that the will of the majority shall regulate whether it be based upon deliberation or governed by passion, prejudice, and impulse, without restraint or regard to consequences. Now, listen to this very last part very carefully of this definition of democracy. Results in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, and anarchy. Let me say that last part again nice and slow so that you can feel it. Not only feel it, you need to smell it, because this shit is real funky. Results in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, and what? Anarchy. This is the definition of democracy in which you now have. Now, do you ignoramuses even know what anarchy is? Anarchy basically equates to the absence of government, which is clearly what you all have right now. No de jure government at all, as the rightful government for the people, of the people, and by the people has been sabotaged and hijacked ever since the Jesuit-sponsored assassination of the Moorish brother, former United States of America President Abraham Lincoln, after the strategically planned U.S. Civil War from 1861 to 1865, and the flooding in of these Jew bankster fiat currency notes by way of the U.S. Federal Reserve Central Bank, which was founded by Paul Warburg of the Jew banker dynasty and Jew banker origin. This is one of the exact things in which Abraham Lincoln was fighting. These filthy foreign Jew banksters. And this is the same damn thing that the mighty China is now facing and battling. These same filthy Jew bankers, in which if all of Africa got behind a Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi, in 2009, and got their own currency like he advised them to do when he was the head of the African Union, this Jew banker problem would have been completely taken care of, and all Asiatics of the world, including you brainwashed, brain damaged U.S. so called Negroes, would be financially and economically free. Okay? So, if you all want to know the effects of U.S. bringing democracy to someone, look at a YouTube video entitled Iraq for Sale, The War Profiteers. I think they did it part one and part two, but it's about an hour and a half. But very informative. Iraq for Sale, The War Profiteers. And you decide if democracy is a good thing or not. Okay, the wicked bitch Hillary Clinton stated that the Middle East needed to be liberated with democracy because the Muslim women were still being oppressed by being forced to wear hijabs forcefully against their will. Okay, I mean, is this not a lion cave woman? Well, anyway, that is exactly what the so-called Middle East is getting: democracy, which is their land stolen, their women raped, a foreign central bank being set up, and Disney World and Santa Claus being forced into the psyche of them and their children. That's democracy. Anyway, that's the end of the news portion of this broadcast, and we will now get into this much needed appropriate topic. All Asiatics should be aligned with each other, as spoken by the words of advice by our noble Asiatic brother, Ju Ali. Very first point that I must bring to the surface in the form of a question is, how is the United Filthy Snakes claiming to try to be competitive with China or anyone else on the earth when it is still holding an entire race of people, the U.S. so-called Negroes, blacks, colored, and African Americans, as slave hostages and bond servants under brutal commercial siege on their own land? I mean, do they actually think that the world does not know this and see this? The United Snakes have humiliated an entire race of Asiatic people over and over again by acting disingenuously to confess doing damage to them, but at the same time giving a wicked disclaimer that that particular confession does not in any way equate to an intent to compensate and repair these same people, in which they just admitted to damaging. I mean, what kind of beast is that? Who does that? Now, how many of you knew that in 2008, a Democrat from Tennessee and filthy Jew, Steve Cohen, introduced a U.S. apology for slavery with nothing but empty feel-good words? This bullshit apology was praised as an unprecedented apology to black Americans for the institution of slavery. You should already detect the bullshit in this apology because black people are manufactured commercial products, and their manufacturer is the United States for-profit commercial corporation. An automobile manufacturer does not apologize for the damages it has done to the automobiles that it manufactures, as the damaged manufactured product is owed no apology. If the manufactured product is defective or damaged during the production process, the manufacturer trashes it or scraps it and manufactures another product. The manufacturer does not hold an official ceremony to apologize to it. I think you get my point. So this U.S. apology refers to you as black in one instance and African American in another instance, which both identities describes commercial product and commodities to be put up for sale on the commercial market. Okay, we already told you that whatever name you calling yourself, if it's on the U.S. Census, it's already a commercial matter. But continuing, in 1997, former U.S. President Redneck Bill Clinton gave his lip service about a race problem in the U.S. and claimed that he considered an apology. Okay, what it not? Okay, was it not the same racist redneck Bill Clinton that passed the 1994 crime bill, which was responsible for mass incarcerating U.S. so-called blacks slash African Americans, in which his wife, Hillary the Wicked Bitch Clinton, lent her support and justification for this crime bill by stating that African young men are super predators? This 1994 crime bill by former U.S. President Redneck Bill Clinton mandated a minimum of 5 years without parole for possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine. Bill Clinton endorsed the idea of a federal 3 strikes and you're out law, which he advocated in his 1994 State of the Union address. The $30 billion crime bill that was sent to, at that time, President Bill Clinton in August of 1994 was hailed as a victory for the Democrats. This crime bill created dozens of new federal capital crimes, mandated life sentences for 3-time offenders, and authorized more than $16 billion for state prison grants and expansion of state and local police forces. Now, just to make sure you all understand, this is a so-called Democrat redneck Bill Clinton doing all of this, which single-handedly mass incarcerated more natural Asiatic melanin-rich so-called black people than any other U.S. legislation in history that I know of in U.S. history. And you all dum-dums thought that the Democrats were your friends and were somehow better than the Republicans. You better think again. But by being brain damaged, it doesn't even matter no more. And then you probably got a vaccination. Don't think. Don't think. It might hurt somebody. We all know a U.S. Negro's mind is a dangerous thing, terribly wasted thing. But continuing, why did redneck Democrat Bill Clinton not address exactly how this crack cocaine was able to rapidly flood the streets of America? On page 6 of the introduction of the book entitled The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness by Michelle Alexander, it states, the Counterintelligence Agency, otherwise known as the alphabet letters CIA, admitted in 1998 that the guerrilla armies which it actively supported in Nicaragua were smuggling illegal drugs into the United States. And these drugs was the crack cocaine that made it on the streets of inner city black neighborhoods. All right, this book goes further on to say that the CIA also admitted that in the midst of the war on drugs, it blocked law enforcement efforts to investigate illegal networks that were helping to fund its covert war in Nicaragua. Okay, and what I say is the U.S. is supposed to be a model example of democracy that they're always trying to shove down the throats of people around the world. Continuing, redneck Bill Clinton in this 1994 crime bill collaborated with a crowd of uniformed pig police officers who are known to be the biggest criminal gangs on America's streets today by far. At this 1994 crime bill signing, under the guise of a so-called war on drugs, redneck Bill Clinton dedicated more than $1 billion for new boats, planes, and weapons, more drug law enforcement agents, additional federal prisons, etc. Bill Clinton's 1994 crime bill alleged war on drugs was in actuality a continued war on natural Asiatic melanin-rich, so-called black and brown peoples of Moorish descent. But all these devils have to do is constantly keep apologizing to the brainwashed, brain damaged, Jesus Christ loving, always and forever forgiving U.S. Negroes, and at the same time keep on humiliating, disrespecting, and exterminating these pathetic Negroes off the planet. You should already see a documented pattern of worthless apologies by these non-peaceful, unnatural, pale-skinned devils. Right now, in Baltimore, Roman Catholic Maryland, the 2021 Baltimore City Police Department budget is $555 million. That's almost a half $1 billion. Okay, that is basically a $500 million. Then these pigs pride themselves in having this mobile command center and communications vehicle, otherwise known as a C-45X-4, in which alone is estimated at anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million. Okay, this monster truck mobile command center is 13 feet tall, 45 feet long, and 7 feet wide. And the latest installed technology includes an Extron-based video system, HD masked camera, Sony and Samsung displays, VSAT satellite system, Cisco IT system, Dell workstations, Motorola radios, and Vislink uplink/downlink microwave system and plotter. A while back, I was visiting the Madama Mall in Baltimore City and saw this mobile police truck vehicle parked in the parking lot. It said police right across the side. I played naive and asked a Negro police officer exactly what that was for at the shopping mall. This demented police house Negro responded by saying, "You must don't know how bad the youth are in Baltimore. The youth are terrible." And I told this Negro that they got this gigantic monster truck, police military vehicle just for Baltimore City youth. And you know that he was referring to the male youth in particular. But this is definitely about exterminating an entire race of people, because when you start killing off and incarcerating the young men of a particular race out of society, the overall complete extermination and annihilation is definitely not too far behind. Because when you get rid of the young men, you have no young men to pursue the young women to procreate with them and keep your race going. So whether he was referring to just youth in general, well, we all know it's a code word for the young men, because that's been a Christian war strategy to kill the young men, which is what they're doing now, because it's still a Christian church policy that's going on. Unum sanctum, Inquisition, if you've been paying attention. On top of that, the redneck Irish Catholic and current Nazi Fuhrer, Fourth Reich Maryland Governor Lawrence J. Hogan Jr., at a recent news conference in Annapolis, Maryland, called for a $150 million boost in state spending on Nazi pig police. So you see a very clear intent to terrorize, exterminate, and incarcerate an entire race of Asiatic so-called black peoples, both on the city and state legislative levels, and ultimately the federal level. If you all want to know about the systematic extermination of peoples of Asiatic Moorish descent in Baltimore, Maryland, you can check out the recent news conference by Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby by going to the YouTube video entitled "Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby Responds to Governor Hogan's Crime Announcement." This particular video is proof and evidence that the so-called Christian, so-called black woman has been strategically put in position to uphold the colonial, pale-faced, so-called white man's agenda of destroying Asiatics in America, which is the destroying of her own people. But she was blindly unable to see that because of her job security and her job salary, which was all set up from the beginning. Now, in these modern times, she is stuck. She is stuck in these times of revelation. She is stuck at the crossroads all by herself, looking dumb as hell, and must now choose a side. I already told you that there is absolutely no more middle for the U.S. Negro in America. Any Negro trying to stay in the middle, especially after seeing the handwriting on the wall, is voluntarily choosing a sure death sentence. Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby is now being railroaded out of her job for having the nerve to say that the Irish Catholic redneck Maryland governor's only solution to every problem is to put more Nazi pig police on the streets and to lock up some more Negroes. A position that Marilyn Mosby says that she refuses to do, as she openly stated and admitted that the state has got to stop over prosecuting people and filling up jails and prisons with all these low-level crimes. That means they've been doing it all along. Of course they have, because that's what's funding the damn state. Prisons, corrections, actually. Anyway, continuing. To continue showing you and emphasize to you the magnitude and level of the instant creation of resources that these devils have access to carry out their brutal extermination of natural Asiatics in North America, otherwise known as the present-day U.S. so-called Negroes, Blacks, Colors, and African Americans. I will now read to you from the same book by Michelle Alexander, entitled The New Jim Crow, from pages 72 and 73, which says, many state and local law enforcement officials were less than pleased with the attempt by federal government to assert itself in local crime fighting, viewing the new drug war as an unwelcome distraction. Participation in the drug war required a diversion of resources away from more serious crimes, such as murder, rape, grand theft, and violent assault, all of which were far greater concern to most communities than illegal drug use. Resistance within law enforcement to the drug war created something of a dilemma for the Reagan administration. In order for the war to actually work, that is, in order for it to succeed in achieving its political goals, it was necessary to build a consensus among state and local law enforcement agencies that the drug war should be a top priority in their hometowns. The solution? Cash. Huge cash grants were made to those law enforcement agencies that were willing to make drug law enforcement a top priority. The new system of control is traceable to a significant degree to a massive bribe offered to state and local law enforcement by the federal government. In 1998, at the behest of the Reagan administration, Congress revised the program that provides federal aid to law enforcement, renaming it the Edward Byrne Memorial State and Local Law Enforcement Assistance Program, after a New York police officer who was shot to death while guarding the home of a drug case witness. The Byrne program was designed to encourage every federal grant recipient to help fight the war on drugs. Millions of dollars in federal aid have been offered to state and local law enforcement agencies willing to wage the war. This federal grant money has resulted in the proliferation of narcotics task forces including those responsible for highway drug interdiction. Nationally, narcotics task forces make up about 40% of all burn grant funding. And burn, that's BYRNE. But in some states, as much as 90% of all burn grant funds go towards specialized narcotics task forces. In fact, it is questionable whether any specialized drug enforcement activity would exist in some states without the burn program. Other forms of valuable aid have been offered as well. The Drug Enforcement Agency has offered free training, intelligence, and technical support to state highway patrol agencies that are willing to commit their officers to highway drug interdiction. The Pentagon, for its part, has given away military intelligence and millions of dollars in firepower to state and local agencies willing to make the rhetorical war a literal one. Almost immediately after the federal dollars began to flow, law enforcement agencies across the country began to compete for funding, equipment, and training. By the late 1990s, the overwhelming majority of state and local police forces in the country had availed themselves of the newly available resources and added a significant military component to buttress their drug war operations. Now, I'm going to interject right here and urge you all to listen to this last part very carefully and acknowledge the specific military armament and weaponry that was allocated for this brutal, fabricated war against you and your families of natural melanin rich Asiatic descent. But yet, all they want to do is continue to apologize for slavery and continue to duck reparations in conversation. This last part says, according to the Cato Institute in 1997 alone, the U.S. Pentagon handed over more than 1.2 million pieces of military equipment to local police departments. Similarly, the National Journal reported that between January 1997 and October of 1999, the agency handled 3.4 million orders of Pentagon equipment from over 11,000 domestic police agencies in all 50 states. Included in the bounty was 253 aircraft, including 6 and 7 passenger planes, UH-60 Black Hawk and UH-1 Huey helicopters, 7,856 M16 rifles, 181 grenade launchers, 8,131 bulletproof helmets, and 1,161 pairs of night vision goggles. A retired police chief in New Haven, Connecticut told the New York Times, "I was offered tanks, bazookas, and anything I wanted." Now that I have just given you all of that crucial factual data of the United Filthy Snakes clearly waging war on natural Asiatic melanin-rich peoples of North America, what natural Asiatic so-called black person is going to knowingly support and approve of the same U.S. beasts now waging war on China, which are Asian/Asiatics of the East? Okay, the time is now for all Asiatics worldwide to align with each other to battle this poisonous, cancerous democracy facade, which is being foisted upon the world by U.S. and European banker interests and military forces, which are ultimately controlled by these same bankers. Asiatic. We're going to bring you to the term Asiatic. Asiatic was the term that Drew Ali used for all melanin-rich, genetically dominant, dark-skinned peoples. In the dictionary of the English language, the word Asiatic, which is an adjective, is defined as of or pertaining to or are characteristics of Asia or its inhabitants. What I'll say is when the natural earth was more geographically conjoined, the entire world was considered to be known to be Asian. Now that the earth has been separated into what we know as the modern continents of today, Asia has been referred to as the mother continent in one instance and the sister continent in another instance. The continent which we now modernly know as Africa is known by some to be referred to historically as East Asia. One major problem is that so-called Africans do not seem to understand that they too are on the Western Hemisphere, along with the Caribbean and South and North America. If you would take a look on ancient maps, the Americas fit up into Africa like a perfect piece to a puzzle, and Africa fits up into Asia the same way. So you can see they was clearly joined at one point and just drifted by some kind of event. So the name and identity African American clearly does not make any sense when you are referring to the same exact landmass when the lands were more geographically joined together. Okay, right now, whether people want to realize it or not, China is doing the humanitarian work of dismantling the hegemony of the filthy international Jew banksters and global monetary gangsters. The continent modernly known as Africa could have single-handedly buried these filthy parasitic banksters and put the nail in the coffin back in 2009 when the African Libyan leader suggested all African nations to immediately get their own currency and to furthermore morph that into a single African monetary unit. Okay, Africa somehow did not or could not step up to the plate, and Asiatic peoples worldwide have been suffering ever since and continue to suffer. So-called Africans in the so-called diaspora, otherwise known as the present-day U.S. so-called Negroes, Black, Colored, and African Americans, who are actually Asiatics/Moors, would have been instantly liberated by Africa's bold and courageous actions, as they are positioned on the same Western Hemisphere. Now, all that so-called Africans, I'm gonna say that again. Now, all that so-called Africans can do to try to divert from the fact that Africa is nothing but a divided failure in front of the world is to constantly brag about all peoples on earth come from Africa. Okay, that's all you hear over and over again. All life comes from Africa. Okay, useless sensations such as this is not going to suffice for any people when the world is filled with people with despotic agendas and despotic interests to rule over entire masses of land and people and to take their resources. Okay? Quoting that you come from Africa, on a shirt and across your forehead is not going to cut it in these days and times. Okay, we hear such sensational stories such as Akon, the Sinhalese entertainer and Sinhalese entrepreneur launching his own city in Senegal. But to me, this is equivalent to his own little personal Disney World. This ain't no big boy shit. Africa failed as a whole to heed the vision of one unified, prosperous Africa. When China or some other nation from Asia comes to buy Akon's little Disney World, Akon to me will sell that shit just like the Negroes in North America sold the Apollo Theater in Harlem and BET and many other things they shouldn't have sold. That's my opinion. That's not a fact, but I think Akon will sell it. If China offer him enough for his little damn Wally world, he'll take it. Continuing, Africa, as a grossly divided continent with a serious lack of unity, must now dance to the tune of whoever is playing the piper. And China and other nations in Asia seems to be playing that piper real hard right about now. I will now read to you all a little bit from an article entitled "The Chinese Yuan Penetrates African Markets." And it poses the question, could the Chinese yuan be the next global reserve currency? This article should be easy to find if you all care to find it and read it in its entirety. Again, the name of this article is "The Chinese Yuan Penetrates African Markets. Could the Chinese yuan be the next global reserve currency?" The article says in March this year, Zimbabwe joined a growing list of African countries in Africa and the world using the Chinese currency, the yuan, also known as a renminbi, as one of its official currencies after its central bank added the renminbi, the Chinese yen, the Australian dollar, and the Indian rupee to the existing basket of currencies. Now, let me interject right here. This article just told you that the African nation of Zimbabwe is not only using Chinese currency as the official currency, China being on the continent of Asia, but also the Japanese yen and Indian rupee, which are both also on the Asian continent. My point is that this is showing you the unavoidable monetary influential hurricane that is now hitting Africa from Asia. Then Zimbabwe has even been reduced to being compelled to take Australian money. This is the pathetic monetary condition of Africa in 2021. Now let me continue with this article. It says Zimbabwe abandoned its currency in 2009 when it was rendered worthless by excessive inflation. Since then, it has been using a basket of currencies dominated by the US dollar. In announcing the decision to adopt the Chinese yuan and other currencies, the then Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, acting Governor Charity Dilaweo, said that the southern African countries' trade and investment with China, India, Japan, and Australia has grown appreciably. China is Zimbabwe's third largest trading partner after South Africa and the European Union, and until recently was the biggest buyer of its tobacco. In 2013, trade between China and Zimbabwe amounted to $1.1 billion. Gift Mugano, a trade expert and lecturer at the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, stated that the addition of the Chinese renminbi to the basket of currencies would only consolidate Zimbabwe's bilateral relations with China and help China's quest to make its currency popular. Now, when I come down further into this article, it says a number of countries in Africa, among them the Bank of Ghana, are using the renminbi as part of their settlement and reserve currency. Earlier this year, the Nigerian central bank reportedly announced that it planned to shift more of its foreign reserves to the yuan, the Chinese yuan, from US dollars as the renminbi gains greater traction in global trade. About 85% of Nigeria's reserves are held in US dollars. In March last year, the South African Reserve Bank signed an agreement with the People's Bank of China to invest in China's bond market. Mauritius is one of the countries where a growing demand for the Chinese currency has been reported. And while the Bank of Zambia has not yet included the renminbi in its reserves, it has pledged to increase its use for trade settlements with China. During his visit to China in August of last year, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta promised to host a renminbi clearinghouse. As Sino-African ties continue to outperform, a number of African central banks are applying to the Chinese central bank for currency swap, which is the exchange of a loan in one currency for another and the placing of a share of their reserves in the renminbi. China has remained Africa China has remained Africa's largest trading partner in 2009. Total trade between China and Africa reached $210.2 billion in 2013, up from 5.9% from the previous year, according to the data from the China Chamber of International Commerce. That's all I'm going to read from that excerpt of that article. Now, what I ask is, where in that article does it says that China is colonizing and exploiting these African nations? Okay, these African nations are voluntarily using their own free will to make a business decision, an economic decision to accept the Chinese currency and to furthermore strengthen their trade ties with China and other countries in Asia. Any of you haters, let me say that again. If any of you haters have been following global monetary matters, you would know that the mighty China and other Asian nations are now a monetary/financial force to be reckoned with. Africa failed to be the courageous visionary that they were supposed to be in 2009 and seized the much needed humanitarian opportunity to bring the world back to a Nubian/Commission/Moorish/African world order. China now has to step up and do what Africa should have done. Okay? Melanin-rich Asiatics ran the world trade in ancient times when the filthy Albion was nowhere on the scene. And if you all know anything about the natural law of cycles, you should already know that it is going to come around one way or the other when Asiatics rule trade and commerce again. That is the time we are now in, as the pale-skinned Albion can't stop what cannot be stopped. And they are not in control. They are clearly not in control. So the mighty China, along with other Asian nations, must now jack the slack of what Africa failed to do. But Africa's not stupid. They know what they got to do. Either get down or lay down. See, this shit ain't no joke. As in the words of the old school New York City rapper Rakim, I used to roll up. This is a hold up. Ain't nothing funny, stop smiling, but still nothing moved but the money. China is now on that humanitarian global gangster shit, especially against them filthy European bankers. It's about time, and I ain't mad at them. The problem is that the U.S. Negro is now stuck on a railroad track by being held commercial hostage by the U.S. Beast Incorporated. And the U.S. definitely is not trying to turn them loose, especially by now drumming up war with China. Okay, the U.S. Negro can blame Africa for that. So whether you all like it or not, the uniting of Asia was predestined to happen and is now happening right before your eyes. What China and other Asian nations are now doing is going to change the world, just like when the Moors fell in 1492, which changed the world. The Moors are coming back, and the Moorish world order is now coming into view. This is what the unnatural pale-skinned humanoids are quaking in their boots about. They scared as hell. They scared as hell. I ain't never heard this many devils talk about China in my life. They talking about something. You better find out what the hell they talking about. and get on the side of whatever they're talking about. That's called leverage. Okay, if they scared of something. You better find out what they're scared of, and at least align with it or use it as leverage against these devils. Because you see what they've been doing to you. But continuing, one of the main problems is that so-called Africans arrogantly got their noses in the air as if they are somehow different and even better than natural Asiatics in North America, when they are both historically known to be Moors. The etymology of the word Moor can be traced to the Phoenician term Mahurin, meaning Westerners. The Semitic etymon Mahurim referred to people of the West, and the term Maghreb meant the West, or the place where the sun sets. And Greater Maghreb referred to further west, while Maghreb al-Aqsa meant the extreme west. According to archaeologist Lawrence Waddell, who studies Sumerian and Sanskrit, early Phoenician titles such as Muru, which is M-U-R-U, and Mer, M-E-R, or Maratu, which is M-A-R-U-T-U, or M-A-R-U-T-U, yeah, can be translated as meaning of the Western Sea or Sea of the Setting Sun. The Akkadian Amuru, which is A-M-U-R-R-U, occur as a geographical term meaning literally the West. So the word Moor as a noun is basically defined as any of the dark-skinned races of people. And from the etymological reference to the word Moor that I just read, Moor is any of the dark-skinned races of people, specifically in the West, otherwise known on the Western Hemisphere. Are you arrogant so-called Africans with your noses in the air, not positioned on the Western Hemisphere, along with the other dark-skinned nations from the Caribbean, South and North America, including what is now called Canada? Okay, my question is, where the hell do you colonize, brainwash so-called Africans think you are? Planet Jupiter? Okay, we do know that when a hairy ass, pale skinned so-called white man come over there to so-called Africa with long blonde hair and a white robe, you all feverishly line up to kiss his ass and call him Jesus Christ. Okay, when one understand, overstand, and understand that the contemporary name America and the modern name Africa are referring to the same exact landmass from when the natural earth was more geographically conjoined, they would know that the inhabitants of both of these land masses are Moors. And that's whether you say M-O-R-S, M-U-R-S, M-A-U-R-S. Okay, due to the fact that they both are geographically positioned on the Western Hemisphere, otherwise simply referred to as the West. During the recently passed 2021 African Caribbean Community Summit, where was the direct representation for melanin-rich, genetically dominant so-called black and brown peoples of North America, otherwise known as Asiatics/Moors, at this particular event? In the very first words of the man speaking in this video at this event, that video is on YouTube, okay, he mentions heads of state and governments providing their input in what he referred to in this particular event specifically as a plenary session. Heads of state is defined as the person who holds the highest position in a national government, in which that national government will be associated with a particular form of government, forms of government such as republic, monarchy, theocracy, democracy, etc. In a national government, the people or the nationals who that government serves appropriately have nationalities. In other words, the national government of Jamaica is supposed to serve Jamaicans. The national government of Ghana serves Ghanaians. the national government of Somalia serves Somalians, and so on and so on and so forth. Where is the national government for the current many countless natural melanin rich, genetically dominant Asiatic slash Africoid aboriginals in North America, otherwise known as Asiatics slash Moors, who are now erroneously presently known and referred to as U.S. so-called Negroes, Blacks, Coloreds, and African Americans? Present day U.S. so-called Negroes, Blacks, Coloreds, and African Americans, due to a long and continuous war, have been culturally slash spiritually slash economically severed from the land, and they now perpetually exist as another foreign establishment's labor, in which human labor is a highly valuable, priceless commodity. This means, furthermore, that this same group of war victim people are now stateless, with no true government structure, descentless, with no verifiable descent, and are non-descendables, meaning that they do not descend from any known ancestors. Secondly, the man speaking at the very beginning of the video at that particular event referred to this 2021 Africa CARICOM event as a plenary session. Plenary session, or plenum, is a session of a conference which all members of all parties are to attend. The attending members, which are referred to in this particular event, are the persons which hold the highest office in a national government, otherwise known as heads of state. This will thoroughly explain why the melanin-rich, genetically dominant so-called black and brown peoples of North America, who are really Asiatics slash Moors, were not represented at this event, and furthermore not even invited to this particular event. Okay, what is the nationality and or status of a people who still identify themselves as crayon colors? Okay, and where is their government? Where is their nation? Natural people around the planet have nationalities and some form of government, which those nations communicate with each other by. Anyway, I think I said enough in this broadcast. I think I said enough. I will now mention that the brother Lamont Maurice L. just dropped another highly informative YouTube presentation somewhere around November 30th on the House of Reawakening Minds featuring Dr. G. Very powerful information indeed. You can see that the first four letters of this brother's name, Maurice, being M-A-U-R. So you know what he is, and he certainly disseminates knowledge like a true Moor. That brother is definitely government material, if you ask me. We need people who are ready to formulate government. We don't have any more time to waste. We've been doing too many damn debates and dialogue, and it's time for governmental action in North America for the Asiatic slash Moors. I'm going to give a shout out to the YouTube channel known as The Sacred Grove. The Sacred Grove. Real informative presentations which give you and show you the facts and breakdown of your history. A job well done, Sacred Grove. The YouTube channel Blackbeard Mirage puts on great historical presentations as well as the Sister Kiera Fuller Bay, in which I had the pleasure of recently coming across. It is always good to see and hear the melanin-rich mother of civilization getting in on this fight to teach her babies, even though her miraculous womb is clearly the first school. Job well done, Kiera Fuller Bay. I'm going to end this broadcast by saying that it is definitely time for a Moorish renaissance in North America. The mighty winds of change are now blowing your way. Hallelujah, let it be begun. Anyway, Dark Matter with another one. I'm out.